Hello, so good afternoon. Welcome everyone to the Canadian Immigrant Web Conference Series in partnership with ACCES Employment and sponsored by Osgoode Professional Development. So this industry-specific web conference for internationally educated lawyers and legal professionals will be 90 minutes long. Please note that this is being recorded and posted on our website to watch for those of you who cannot attend in person. So thank you to our sponsors who support Canadian Immigrant and allow us to run these free events and webinars for newcomers across the country. So thank you. I'm thrilled to welcome our friends from Osgoode Professional Development today. Our first of two keynote speakers is Megan Thomas. Megan, welcome. Megan is the Director, Professional Graduate and International Programs at Osgoode Professional Development and oversees the Professional LLM, which provides graduate legal education designed for um, for experienced lawyers and professionals and complementary non-credit programs designed for internationally trained lawyers. If you have questions for Megan, please feel free to type them in the chat by clicking on the chat function or the Q&A buttons, and which is on the right-hand side, and we will answer them at the end of the presentation. You can also email us your questions at info@canadianimmigrant.ca. Megan, thank you for joining us today. The floor is yours.
Great. Thank you very much, Ramya, and welcome everyone. I'm really pleased to be with you today. As you heard in the introduction, a big part of what we do at Osgoode Professional Development is run programs that are specifically designed for internationally trained lawyers, but we also have a lot of internationally trained lawyers in programs that are not specifically designed for that audience. And so we have a lot of experience with this group who's joining us today. I just want to make a quick housekeeping note. I have a family member with a medical situation today, and so I am expecting a phone call at some point this afternoon to update me. I will have to take that call if it comes in during the session. My wonderful colleague, Michael Tam, will hop on for a few minutes and take over from me, but hopefully the call will come after the end. What I'm going to do is share my presentation now. And I'm going to try to make the presentation portion of the session relatively short so that I can leave lots of time for Q&A at the end. And what I'm going to be focusing on today are education options that you might be thinking about as an internationally trained lawyer. And those are designed to achieve different outcomes for people. So I'm going to talk first about the different outcomes that you might be thinking about. Some of these are shorter term, some of them are longer term. Some of them may be things that you would do in sequence, and all of that will reveal itself shortly. I'll then talk about some different educational pathways that are available for those outcomes. And then we'll end up by talking about some practical considerations because, of course, we have to weigh all of these different factors when we're thinking about educational options. And sometimes practical considerations like budget might be really important and might drive some of the decision making. Okay, so let's start out with focusing on the desired outcome. So the first question that you will want to ask yourself, and I'm sure for a lot of you the answer here is yes, is are you looking to become accredited to practice law here in Canada? Now, the main decision point there is, do you want to come to a common law jurisdiction or a civil law jurisdiction? So within Canada, we have one civil law jurisdiction, which is Quebec, and then the remaining provinces and territories are common law based. So if you're looking for accreditation options, you'll want to think first about that jurisdictional question and then look at options. Second option might be looking to work in a non-practicing capacity. And as our society has become more regulated, the cost of legal services has become an issue. A lot of organizations have been adding people with legal training in roles that are not specifically lawyer roles. So this is a good option to be looking at. Some folks, especially those in that first period when you're coming to Canada are looking for a more entry-level job, something that's going to allow them to generate some income, potentially something that will give them some exposure to Canadian law or related areas. And so that can sometimes be a shorter term goal that people are thinking about. And again, of course, the final question is they're both a short term and a longer term goal. So sometimes people do all three of these things. We see people arriving in Canada, they look for a job that is sort of an easier one to obtain, to start working in the workforce, start making some professional contacts. They then might be working in a non-practicing capacity, let's say in a paralegal type role, in consulting, etc. And then often we will see that those folks eventually will decide that they want to become accredited. In other cases, that's not the situation. And in yet other situations, people know for sure, I want to go right into the accreditation option. So there's no one size fits all pathway here for people who are coming to Canada with international credentials. Okay, so let's talk first about options for accreditation. So the first thing that is necessary to understand is that if you are coming to one of the common law jurisdictions in Canada or thinking about working there and becoming accredited, there is a body called the National Committee on Accreditation, and it assesses the credentials of anyone who has a law degree from outside Canada. There's a separate process for Quebec. And so anyone thinking about that should sort of do their own research. And if you're coming from a civil law jurisdiction, it's my understanding that it's a much more straightforward process for Quebec. So National Committee on Accreditation, you would submit your credentials to them. They have a website that they've improved significantly over the last couple of years, so their website's very helpful. We also have a page on our website that explains how to become accredited to practice and the main assessment types, depending on your background. So to give you a brief outline, those of you who are coming from civil law jurisdictions, which is a very broad spectrum within the world, a lot of Europe, Latin America, China, the Middle East, lots of civil law jurisdictions around the world. Typically, the NCA will say you need to go back to a law school in Canada or a common law jurisdiction and do some common law based education. You can complete specific subjects. Generally, the NCA will require 8 subjects specifically for people from civil law jurisdictions. So you can either look for a program in which you can do those subjects, or you can do a common law based LLM, for example, and then get a reassessment done. So that's the civil law pathway. Common law, if you've done an in-person law degree in a common law jurisdiction, typically your NCA assessment will allow you to either write challenge exams directly with the NCA, which is the regulator, or you can take courses at a Canadian law school. And typically that common law in-person law degree based assessment involves somewhere between 5 and 8 subjects. There's then another common type of assessment, which is those who've gone to a distance education degree. Those are quite popular in jurisdictions like the UK. There you're going to have a more onerous requirement for accreditation, which typically involves 2 years of education in Canada. So very different depending on which background you're coming from. If your assessment gives you options for completion, again, you'll either be writing exams directly with the regulator or taking courses at a Canadian law school, or some combination of those two. There are a number of schools across Canada that offer access to individual courses, and so that can be a way to take 1 or 2 or maybe more courses, or you can do a program, which we'll talk about in a moment. Timelines, the NCA assessment will have a 5-year expiry date on it. So if you're not sure that you want to go through the NCA process, If you're thinking about getting your assessment done, just keep in mind that you will have 5 years from the date of your assessment to complete your requirements. If you don't complete them within that time, you'll need a reassessment. So that would involve additional cost. And so, it is a pretty generous amount of time, but if you're really not sure, you may want to wait to get the assessment done. So let's talk about program options that are available if you are thinking about becoming accredited to practice law. So the first one, and the one that will give you kind of the most coverage of your accreditation options, would be a Master's of Law program or similar program at one of the law schools across Canada that offers these programs. So in terms of LLM programs, we have the professional LLM at Osgoode Professional Development with a variety of different specializations. The Canadian Common Law specialization is really focused on these NCA subjects, whereas other specializations will give you different courses and some access to the NCA subjects. So programs like international business law, for example. You then have similar programs at the University of British Columbia and at the University of Toronto. And then there are a couple of programs out there that are not LLMs, but are credit programs intended for internationally trained lawyers. There's one at the University of Alberta and one at the University of Calgary that's very new. So a number of options across the country to look at. You then have the option of going into one of the JD programs across Canada as what's called usually something like an NCA special student. Those processes will give you access to specific courses within a JD program that correspond to your NCA requirements. And I mentioned a couple of minutes ago this idea of single course options. So again, with us at Osgoode PD, this is a popular option where students will apply for, let's say, one or two of their NCA subjects. UBC also offers this option, and it may be available at other schools as well. So there are different ways of sort of slicing and dicing the requirements to put them together. There are then NCA prep programs or other exam supports available. So again, at Osgoode PD, we have the only law school-based NCA prep program. It's intended to get you ready for those challenge exams with the NCA. But there are a number of other providers out there. There are some private colleges and a lot of private tutors and tutoring businesses that are out there providing these supports. And so there's lots to look at and consider if you're thinking about that exam writing route, which is the best one for you. Some of the tutoring services that are out there are relatively new, others have been around for a while, so it's often possible to look at reviews and see what people are recommending. Certainly before spending your money, you'll want to do your research to see if the services will meet your needs. And then finally, there are some complementary programs that will help you with different skills related to either NCA exam writing or career development, et cetera. So language programs. We have an intensive advanced legal English program, which is really focused on lawyers. That is a program that we offer at Osgoode PD in conjunction with our colleagues at ULE, the York University English Language Institute. We have a graduate diploma program in Foundations of Canadian Law. These are programs that are intended for people either who have slightly lower language scores than might be required for LLM study, or who may be looking for that more gradual learning, communication, language, support, learning about the foundational concepts. So maybe those who are coming from civil law jurisdictions, or who may have gone to school a very long time ago, or who may feel that their academic skills are a bit rusty and in need of some work. So those are all options that are available to assist you in this accreditation pathway. And so thinking about, we're going to talk at the end about practical considerations, budget, timelines, options. what your plan is in terms of your accreditation timeline and plans, and which of these options might make sense for you. So let's move next to education options for non-practicing roles. So in this particular case, some people move into a non-practicing role without taking advantage of any educational options. So keep in mind that all of you will have knowledge and skills and experience that are going to be transferable from whatever jurisdiction you've been working in or your education is from. So you don't necessarily need an educational option to move into a practicing role. But it may be helpful if you perceive that the law or practice may be very different here in Canada, or you're looking at switching fields. You may want to do some sort of program to assist you. So again, here there are lots of different options, and here more options in many cases than for accreditation, because you're going to be looking at the type of role you want to move into and then seeing what might assist you. So there are, again, LLM degree options that are specialized. Just with a few examples of the ones we have at Osgoode PD: taxation law, financial law, health law, administrative law, international business law. We have about 15 of these specializations. They are very helpful in terms of not only the subject matter knowledge, but also the networking, because many of the students who are in these programs are lawyers. Many of them are not lawyers who are working in related fields. And so you have sort of an instantaneous network of people who are out there working and who may have leads in terms of career opportunities. The other thing that you'll get in most LLM programs, certainly at Osgoode PD, services may be different at other schools, but we offer a full range of career development services. So students who are in the accreditation process, there's a whole set of services for that. Students who are looking for other types of career change, non-practicing or practicing, again, there is career development support for that. Secondly, single courses. So let's assume, for example, that you are thinking about working in something business related, perhaps financial services. And maybe you have experience in financial services from another jurisdiction, but you've looked around in the landscape here in Canada and you see that anti-money laundering is a really hot area where there are a lot of careers, or privacy, for example. You might look at taking a single credit course in that particular subject. Give yourself a primer. Again, give yourself a network of people who are also interested in that field. So that can be a sort of lower commitment option. Also, it can be a good way of testing out the courses that are available in an LLM or other programs. So you take one course, you see if you like it, and then potentially down the road, you decide to take the full program. Colleges or other educational institutions offer programs that can be helpful. So one route that we see being very popular among internationally trained lawyers is to become a paralegal or a law clerk, or perhaps an immigration consultant. Those are all great ways of using your legal skill. Programs tend to be shorter, somewhat less expensive than university programs often, so that can be an accessible way of moving into a career in the legal field. But also, lots of other practical college programs, business management, pretty much any field, there will be programs there. And so it's good to look at ways of using your interests and knowledge to move into some complementary role here in Canada. Certificate programs are another great option. A lot of these will be offered through the continuing studies arms of universities. So at Osgoode PD, we run continuing professional development programs, a lot of which are several day certificate programs that will give you a certificate at the end. You'll do an assessment, so you'll be able to be confident that you have good knowledge in a particular area. So a couple of examples that we have would be certificate in labor law, certificate in human rights law. Those can be, again, good ways of getting up to speed on the law in a particular area. In Canada, they tend to be a little bit shallower and broader than university courses, and usually quite practically oriented. Um, at York University, more broadly, there is a School of Continuing Studies that also offers a lot of great certificate programs, including in things like privacy, um, and also in areas like dispute resolution. So lots of options out there for sort of non-credit um, programs that may help with non-practicing skills and knowledge. Okay, last idea, this idea of thinking about a quick entry option. So you're not looking to requalify just yet. You're maybe not looking at accreditation, or you're working through accreditation on a longer timeline. So let's say you have an assessment that allows you to write your challenge exams with the NCA, and you may be planning to do that over a period of several years. Um, you know, Finances may be a concern, so you may need to get a job quickly. And so again, things to think about in terms of supports that you might want to look for: language programs and writing programs, particularly if you're coming from a background of English not being your first language, or perhaps you're coming from a jurisdiction where English language usage is significantly different. You may want to look at these programs that are available. Some of them are available at low or no cost through settlement agencies for people who are new to Canada, or you can look at ones that are more tailored to the legal industry, such as intensive advanced legal English. These are programs that can help you with communication skills, so they can help you make your cover letters and resumes more effective and help you be more effective within any work environment here in Canada. Single courses, again, can be a great option, or certificates or continuing ed programs. Again, if you're thinking about being able to move quickly into a job that is law related in some way, probably not the forever job that you have in mind, but something that is going to get you generating income, get you that all important work network that is helpful to you in finding out about other more significant opportunities that may be available down the road, and maybe giving you the luxury of some time to think about these longer term options. So let's talk, my last sort of formal thing that I want to talk through is some practical considerations. So as I think I said at the outset, this process is not one size fits all for every candidate. Everyone is different in terms of their personal circumstances, their family situation, their professional goals, their timelines for things. And so you need to sit down with your own problem solving method, whether it's pros and cons or how you sort of prioritize different things. Um, the first thing to think about is cost. And I guess I would contrast the first and last points. So in business development and marketing, we often think about this idea of, is it a budget issue or is it a value issue? So if you have a budget for your studies that's limited and there isn't flexibility there, then you'll want to look for things that fall within your budget. Think about financing options though. So if you're looking at a degree program, particularly one that would be full-time, you can often access provincial loan or government loan programs once you have permanent status in Canada, so permanent resident or citizen. There are a number of banks out there that will give professional student lines of credit. Some degree programs for law will have funding So particularly research-based LLM programs will have often scholarships or funding packages available. If you're looking at more professional programs like the ones we run at Osgoode PD, those tend to be non-funded. So you do need to come up with your own financing plan. There are a number of great lenders out there who serve both the international student population as well as the newcomer to Canada market. So there are micro lending organizations, for example, that will give small loans to facilitate reaccreditation or credentialing. So look at the cost and also look at the resources that may be available to fund that cost and whether you're comfortable taking on loans because perhaps the pathway that you're going down is going to result in higher income down the road. Length. So if you're looking at a degree program, most Masters of Law programs will be 1 year full-time. Some are 2 years. At Osgoode PD, we also have a whole bunch of part-time options, which are typically 2 years if you complete them continuously, but there are options to take time off if you need to for personal or professional reasons. If you were thinking about going back and doing a whole new law degree in Canada, that's typically a 3-year commitment. Most people aren't doing that now because there are LLM programs that will help you through your NCA accreditation. Obviously, then you're going to go through the whole spectrum. So college programs may be shorter. Non-credit or certificate programs can range from half a day, several days, up to a few months in length. So wide variety in terms of length. Time commitment. So are you going to be working while you are doing this educational program? Is there a part-time option to allow you to work? Or are you thinking that you want to sort of take a break from everything else and go and study full-time for a more compressed period? Does the time commitment work with your other commitments in other parts of your life? So important to look at those options. Some educational institutions will have restrictions on your ability to work if you're doing a full-time program. So that is just something to think about. But again, for full-time programs, government loans may be easier to get, so it may be worthwhile to do the full-time option and take the time out and finish more quickly. What's the credential you're getting at the end? So a lot of people like the idea of receiving a master's degree. So that's a really popular option for that reason. Other people, and in other situations, may be thinking that the learning is more important, the learning outcomes, the material that they're going to get. So that's another thing to think about. Are you going to receive a diploma? Are you going to receive a certificate or some other kind of credential that you can use? And is that credential meaningful in the field where you're looking? So this isn't so much of an issue with accreditation options because the main thing you're looking for is the NCA certificate at the end. And if you're doing an LLM, great, that's a bonus. As most people know, an LLM is not really a degree that's required specifically for any job, but it is great as an accomplishment to have an LLM, obviously. However, if you're looking at non-practicing options, then other kinds of credentials may be important. So to go back to the privacy idea, there are some privacy certifications out there that you can do to help you advance in an area like that. So that's a great part of your research that you can do if you are looking at non-practicing options. And finally, this idea of what's the value you're getting? What are all the different services that you're getting as part of your program? So again, you're going to see probably a sliding scale. Degree programs are likely going to come with a whole bunch of co-curricular activities, extracurricular activities, different kinds of supports. So at Osgoode PD, we take this part of what we do really seriously. So we offer academic support, career support, and wellness support through a dedicated wellness counselor. And that comes in a range of different forms. So there are workshops, there are resources available. Um, there are workshops that are sort of for larger groups of students, as well as more specific ones on things like licensing and accreditation. And then we also provide access to one-on-one appointment booking for our students for any of those different types of support. So that's something that we take seriously because we know students are making a big investment in terms of time and money in a degree program. If you're taking a shorter program or one that is non-credit, you can probably expect that those types of services would not be available, although sometimes they may be. So something to factor into your decision in terms of what's important to you in terms of getting the most out of that program and achieving your objectives. So I'm going to stop there. That leaves us about 10 minutes or so for questions. And I'm happy to take questions now. I've put up our website here. Our website is actually brand new. We just launched it last week. And for those of you who may have looked at our website in the past, you'll notice that now we have some additional new pages. Study law in Canada, practice law in Canada, accreditation options. So there's lots more information on the website that may be helpful to you in terms of deciding how to pursue these different options. And I've put up the email here for our recruitment coordinator, who is the person who speaks to prospective applicants to our program. So if you do have questions about a program that you're interested in, you can either contact her directly, or we recommend attending one of our information sessions, which we run on a very regular basis, and you can sign up through the website. So Ramia, do you have some questions for me?
Great. Megan, thank you for that very comprehensive presentation. We have a number of questions. I'm glad that you shared your contact. So if we don't get to your question today, please send an email at recruitment-opd@osgoode.urq.ca, which is on the screen, or to info@canadianimmigrant.ca. So the first question is there any support for internationally trained lawyers who are already enrolled in an LLM program and did not secure an articling position during this round of applications in Vancouver and Toronto?
Sure. So I'll speak to what we do in our program at Osgoode PD. If students are in LLM programs at other law schools, there should be sort of something similar happening, but reach out to your program administrator or graduate program director if you have questions. So yes, Michael's going to be talking more about career development in his presentation, but one of the things on the timeline point is that some of the recruitment processes for lawyers and for the licensing process for articling positions, which is a portion of the licensing process, are quite structured. But the good news is that those structured processes are not the only processes out there. A lot of employers will recruit informally at different times. And so what we provide to our students is both information about when those processes are happening and how to take advantage of them if they wish, because again, everybody's timeline and plans are going to be a little bit different. And if they're not successful in securing a role in those processes, or they've decided to defer the process and participate later, then students would be participating in the workshops that we're running on how to secure a position. They would be recommended to different types of outside resources, career coaches, legal organizations where you can do networking or secure a mentor. And we have both a job listing board, so jobs that are coming up on an ongoing basis would be listed there. And a lot of what we end up doing with our students is the one-on-one counseling, because we've found over the years that what's really effective is helping students figure out a strategy that's going to be helpful for them specifically in terms of where their interests lie. because students who are coming in with previous experience and education from other jurisdictions often have a more specific idea of what they want to do long term. So we want to try to make sure that we're helping them secure some opportunity that's going to further those goals.
Thank you, Megan. Great information. Our next question is, how and where can I find out through which universities I can take the LLM for the NCA process?
So the best place to check is actually the NCA's website. They have a resources page where they list the various programs that exist throughout Canada, and the different educational institutions provide them updates from time to time if programs change. But yeah, resources for candidates on the NCA page. That will give you a listing of the options across Canada. They're all a little bit different. Um, Timelines for applications are different, so it's a good idea to be checking well in advance of when you might want to be starting a program to make sure that you're not missing application timelines.
Thank you. The next question is, if I choose the PrEP NCA option and I am not presently in Canada, how do you advise I get to Canada to do the PrEP?
So prep courses that we run at Osgoode PD are fully virtual. Um, and that has been the case even before COVID. So our NCA exam prep course is a fully online course. It's modular. And so candidates go in, they can sort of use whichever portions. They can either use the whole course and do everything that's available in it, or they can use portions of it that are helpful to them. So it's simply buy on the website and use at your own pace sort of thing. Other NCA prep options that are out there, again, currently, I would expect most of that is available virtually if you're working with tutors, if you're taking courses available elsewhere. But as things go back to normal and more things are available in person, then potentially you would be looking at maybe needing to come in for an in-person course, in which case you would need to consult with Immigration Canada to see if the program that you're taking requires a study permit or whether you can simply come in on a visitor visa. And my understanding is that's usually determined by the length of the program that you're coming in for.
Great, thank you for that. Next question, are there any resources that are available for internationally trained lawyers to help with obtaining an articling position?
There are, yes, absolutely. Which resources you have access to will depend on whether you're doing an educational program or not. So a few minutes ago, I talked about all the things we do for our own students. Let's imagine someone who is doing the NCA process on their own. So you've got your assessment. The NCA has said, okay, you need to write 5 exams or take 5 courses. In that case, you'll be simply writing the exams on your own. The probably best resources in those kinds of circumstances are events like this one. We run an event at Osgoode every year called Osgoode's Internationally Trained Lawyers Day. It usually happens in May every year. That's something that anybody can register for. We have sessions like today. There are a lot of really good legal organizations that you can join. Those can either be practice area based, they can be geographically based, they can be based on membership in a particular community. And so, definitely take a look at those organizations. Some of them have formal mentoring programs. Some of them will help with job search. There are also a number of organizations that have been started for internationally trained lawyers themselves. So there's NCA networks and ITL NCA networks, just to give a couple of examples. And my colleague Michael, who's going to be talking next, is on the board of one of those organizations. So those are great for accessing information about employment opportunities. And then depending where you're looking at working, there may be sort of local events or organizations that will assist. So again, as an example, I know in Alberta, The Law Society will typically run an event each year for internationally trained lawyers, and that happens in different locations around the country. So it's a little bit more research on your part if you are going through the process yourself, but there definitely is support out there. You just have to sort of decide, look around, and then decide which of those things is likely to be helpful and how much time you have, because you know, if you're working or doing other things, you may not be able to join every organization.
Thank you, Megan. I think we'll um, take another couple of questions. So the next one is, do courses such as administrative law and professional responsibility in a college in Canada count towards the courses to write for the NCA exams?
So in a college, no. In a law school, yes. So the National Committee on Accreditation's policies, what they end up doing is they'll do sort of two levels of approval of courses that you might take toward your NCA requirements. So in programs like ours, in our Canadian Common Law program, we have had our outlines for our courses pre-approved by the NCA, so we know that they meet their requirements. And then NCA candidates are required to get approval from the NCA if they plan to do an educational program. So you have these sort of two levels of approval. Typically, if you're taking a course at a Canadian law school, that will be considered satisfactory in terms of the NCA's requirements. But courses in things like administrative law or constitutional law or any of those other subjects at a college in Canada would not count toward your NCA requirements. And also some law schools in other jurisdictions, like in the UK, will run Canadian law courses. Those will not satisfy your NCA requirements. So you will still have to satisfy competency, even though you've taken those courses. Now, the courses could be really helpful, though, if you're planning to write the challenge exams, you'll probably be pretty well placed to do so. But no, it's very limited to the Canadian law school environment.
Thank you for all those details and for fully answering the question. We'll just take one last question. Um, I'm a current student in International Business Law LLM program. How can I apply for work/study and research at York program, York Ray program?
Okay, so students in our program are often looking for jobs to do during the program as well as after. And so what we do in our program is we run, again, workshops on sort of strategies to secure part-time employment while you're in the program. As well as all of those different workshops and services I talked about for employment. Some of those are geared specifically to articling employment. Others would be geared to other types of employment. So to use the international business law example, sometimes those students would be looking to work in financial services or in a corporate environment doing things like contract negotiation. We try to help students sort of define where they might want to look for those types of opportunities. And I suspect the same would be true of other educational institutions, that their career development services would be geared to a variety of different things. One thing that is maybe different about our program versus graduate programs at other law schools around Canada is because our LLM is a professional LLM, it's non-funded. Typically, our students don't have access to things like graduate assistant or teaching assistant roles. Those would be limited to research stream programs. So if people are looking at that kind of academic employment, they would want to think about research stream programs instead.
Megan, thank you. Thank you for your comprehensive presentation and the comprehensive Q&A. So if we didn't get to your questions, my colleague has just put in the contact information and the email to send your questions to. And we also have the screen where Megan has shared the contact information. So please do send us your questions and we will get back to you. So we welcome our second speaker. Next up to join us on the Canadian Immigrant Web Conference Series for internationally trained lawyers and legal professionals, organized in partnership with ACCES Employment and sponsored by Osgoode Professional Development, is Michael Tam. Michael is a program lawyer, professional graduate and professional graduate international programs at Osgoode Professional Development. He does program and curricular development and academic and career advising for graduate law students. So Michael's been with us before, and we look forward to his presentation. If you have any questions for Michael, please feel free to type them in the chat box or the Q&A button. And on the right-hand side, the Q&A button, you can type them on the right-hand side, and we will answer them after Michael's presentation. So Michael, we're thrilled to have you again. So please go ahead.
Thanks, Ramya. I'm so happy to be speaking at a conference like this, being an immigrant myself, being an internationally trained lawyer myself. So I'm happy to answer and help a lot of the participants who are on this chat today. I'm actually glad to hear all the questions from the previous session, because I think my presentation is going to cover quite a bit about answering and addressing a lot of those, especially career concerns that a lot of people had. So my presentation is on launching your legal career in the Canadian market. And the first thing I wanted to cover is to make sure that you're coming at this with the proper mindset. Often when I'm at events, networking events, or even running online sessions like this, I hear these statements that are just supremely false. So I often hear from internationally trained lawyers things like, I'm just not as competitive as a Canadian student, or I need Canadian experience in order to be competitive, or some version of that where they think the employer only values, Canadian trained students. And that's absolutely not true. So I need all of you to really shift your mindset. And the idea that you're not as competitive as a Canadian law student, you're really just less familiar with the process. Canadian law students also have to figure all of this out from the get-go, figure out recruitment timelines, how employers recruit for jobs, and they have 3 years in law school to help themselves figure that out. I know that internationally trained lawyers, especially new immigrants, you've got a lot more pressures in terms of finances and work, and you want to get sort of going with your career. But know that there are just more and more resources like attending this kind of event, but also, different associations out there who are designed to help you figure this out as well. And so it's not that you're less competitive, you're just less familiar. And as professionals, as legal professionals in your own right, you can figure it out really easily and really quickly once you realize where the resources are. And the idea that only Canadian experience is valued in order to be competitive is also just false. First, we're living in a more and more global environment. But secondly, the practice of law and being a lawyer is the same no matter where in the world you are. I often tell students in career counseling appointments, being yelled at by a judge feels the same anywhere in the world. Filing documents in the time that by the due date, by the limitation periods is the same. Managing client expectations, whether they're litigants in a personal injury case or a corporate client, giving them advice and managing their legal expectations is exactly the same. The only difference is the law. Right? The legislation might be different. The actual forms themselves might be different. The process by which to get a judgment or an order might be different. But the practice of it, the experience of being a lawyer is exactly the same. And if you're able to present the experience you've gotten from abroad in a way that aligns with what the job you're applying to is, people are going to be impressed by that. And so you need to remember that not to undervalue the experience that you are coming with, the years of practice that you might be arriving in Canada with, and to really sell that to whoever you're speaking to and on your application materials themselves. What is needed for yourself is to advocate for yourself, right? As lawyers, you need to have excellent written and oral advocacy in your legal practice. And that's completely true in your job search, in your networking, in how you're approaching starting your career in Canada. No one's going to advocate for you except for you. So you need to make sure that every time you're speaking to someone, every time you're interviewing someone, that it's the best example of your oral advocacy skills for yourself. Same with all of your application materials. Anytime you're writing a correspondence to somebody, anytime you're applying for a job, these are your written advocacy skills for yourself. Can you convince an employer, for example, on paper, on your resume and cover letter to give you the job? Can you convince somebody you're trying to network with on an email to give you the time to speak with you? So these are just skills that you as a lawyer have. You just need to take that and think about it at the beginning of your career search and in every aspect of your career hunt. And it is also true that there will be some cultural differences. In Canada, the legal profession is going to see you all as peers. And I know that in other jurisdictions, there's a tendency to be a little bit more hierarchical or defer to somebody who you perceive as being an authority person. Whereas here, lawyers are just lawyers. We all treat each other as peers, and we want you to contribute meaningfully as peers as well. And again, I'll take this back to an example of, talking with my students. Often students who are in a classroom will just sit and be lectured at and wait to be asked questions, whereas really, especially in, our programs, our instructors are treating the students as if they're peers and want to hear their opinions, want you to engage with the material. And if you take that sort of distance and deference and sort of adherence to authority away, you can be a little bit more open and speak to other lawyers that you're engaged with in a much more professional capacity. They'll also see you as a professional as opposed to just a student, and it will make yourself come off much more confident. You'll also start to realize once you engage with more and more people in the Canadian legal profession that everyone really does want to help. Everyone wants to impart their advice. Everyone wants to help you along. Everyone understands how difficult it is to be licensed. And especially other internationally trained lawyers will understand how hard it is to not only get accredited, but also get licensed. And certainly immigrants to Canada will know not only the struggles of immigrant life, but then accreditation and licensing. And so the more you find people who resonate with your story, the more you find people who are going to be able to assist you in this process, the more you're going to realize everyone's going to want to give you advice. Everyone's going to want to help you. You just need to learn how to approach people in the way that they can actually help you. And not everyone can help you in the exact same way. And not everyone has the time to help you about everything that's going on in your life. So your approach to different people will just have to be different. But you'll find that if you're approaching a person with an issue that they can help you with, they will more than likely try to give you some time and some advice. You cannot be passive in your own career. And so this speaks to all levels of it, whether or not you're trying to get access to accreditation. You can't just hope to sit in a class and magically get your accreditation. You do need to excel. You need to show the instructor that you're competent and have mastered the legal issues involved in the subject area, but also in hunting for a job. You can't just wait for jobs to be posted magically to you and to magically find them on some website that lists every job. That just doesn't happen. And so you need to be a little bit more active and do your research and figure out where are all the different ways that I can find opportunities and find jobs So I'll go through some of that as well on my next slide. And there will be some differences in application materials. Even for those of you who've been in Canada for a while and have applied for Canadian jobs, applying for a Canadian legal job is very different. And I go back to having good written advocacy skills for yourself. The way you express the experience you've had in the past in other jurisdictions, the way you translate the skills you've developed from those previous jobs, even the way you've translated some of the non-legal jobs that you've had in a way that speaks to articling job or a junior level lawyer job. Those are really important things to start learning how to do and starting to figure out how to incorporate into your resume so that it really does stand out and shine, and you're able to showcase the amazing experience and skills that you have developed. And then finally, there might be some, differences in networking and interpersonal interactions. And again, I go to maybe jurisdictions where there is, again, more deference and more deference to authority. I often go to, before COVID, wine and cheese events where, I'd stand around and people would realize, oh, I'm an internationally trained lawyer, I can help other internationally trained lawyers. And then I'd end up in sort of a semicircle with 5 or 6 people who are internationally trained themselves, but they're all expecting me to lecture them or impart my advice upon them, when really I'm hoping to have a conversation with everyone and have everyone sort of participate meaningfully and share their experiences. And so, yes, there are some truths about things that you want to adapt to, like advocating for yourself and understanding some of the cultural differences. But really, you need to get out of the mindset of thinking that you're somehow less than in terms of a Canadian legal graduate, or less than because you have not yet gotten any Canadian experience, because again, those are just absolutely not true. So in terms of job hunting, Megan touched on this earlier, but you also need to figure out for yourself, where are you in the process? Are you still looking to get accredited? Are you almost finished accreditation with the NCA? Have you gotten your certificate of qualification? Have you registered for licensing during a licensing cycle with the Law Society? And have you decided which Law Society you're a candidate in? Why it's important for you to know the process is because as an employer, if I have a job and it needs to start, August 1st of 2021, I need to know that you can start for that date, which also means you need to know, are you able to start August 1st for that date? And depending on if it's a summer student position, if it's an articling position, if it's a legal associate position, those have different requirements as far as where you are in the accreditation or licensing process. And it's not the employer's job to figure out if you're going to be able to start. It's your job to figure out, can I start that job on the day that it starts? And so you need to be confident and understand where you are in the process and how you might fit in to the requirements of the job and whether or not you can start for that date. Megan also touched on, what kind of jobs are you looking for? Are you looking for specifically law student type jobs? So there are things called the 1L and 2L summer student jobs. And for internationally trained lawyers, those would be equivalent to somebody who's still going through the accreditation process, who might be about a year away from licensing. There are what's called on-campus interviews, which is a part of the recruitment for second-year summer position jobs. And again, ITL NCA Network is an association that is helping NCA candidates get access to these kind of opportunities. And again, for second-year summer position jobs, these are people who are about a year away from starting the licensing process. And if that's something you're interested in, maybe you participate in that recruit. Articling jobs are people, the start dates for the articling are things that you need to already have got your certificate of qualification for. And so if by the time that job starts, you will have your certificate of qualification, then you might think about participating in the recruitment for those articling jobs. And LPP placements, again, are a part of licensing. And so again, you'll need to have your certificate of qualification from the NCA to apply to become an LPP candidate, to apply for some of those placements. Now, the difficulty here is that a lot of the recruitment periods and timelines for summer positions, for articling positions, even for LPP placements, take place, either just a few months, but in most cases about a year in advance. And again, this is why it's so important for you to know where you are in the process, because where you are in the process will dictate the types of jobs you can apply for, because then you'll be confident that you can start the job at the time at which it starts. I often get questions from internationally trained lawyers about, should I take legal assistant jobs and law clerks and paralegal positions in the hopes of getting that Canadian experience? Well, one, refer back to what I said earlier. Canadian experience is not the only thing that you should value, because that's not going to outweigh the fact that you have other experience. Canadian experience is certainly beneficial to understand what the Canadian legal market needs of you and what skills you're going to need to emphasize, and also to get familiar with specific practice areas. But remember, all of these other jobs, legal assistant, law clerk, paralegal, are careers in themselves. A lot of students hope, oh, if I get a legal assistant job, maybe they'll offer me an articling position, or maybe I can intern for a while in hopes of getting the articling position. There is a possibility, but you can't guarantee that. And again, from the point of view of an employer, if, for example, I need a legal assistant to help out two of my super busy lawyers, the idea is that you would be coming on to help out those two lawyers, not that you would come on for 2 months, help those lawyers out, and hope to become an articling student later, because what that leaves the employer in the position of is now those two lawyers still need help again, and I'll need to find another legal assistant to cover that. So where you're applying for those kind of jobs, I just want you to be very mindful. Can you actually do the job that's expected of you for the duration that they're expecting? Don't apply for a job that's not what is intended. So again, if you're intending for an articling position, but you're applying for the legal assistant position, that's a risky move, because again, the employer just wants the legal assistant right now. And it's hard for you to convince them otherwise, or convince them for a role that they're not actually considering. Where to look for jobs is a huge question. A lot of students always ask me, isn't there just like one web page where I can find all of the jobs? And then there's something where I can just apply to everything. And certainly there are certain websites. The Law Society maintains an articling registry. If you are at a university studying in a Canadian legal institution, you'll have access probably to the career portal with job postings as well. Indeed, LinkedIn will have a lot of that. But remember, anything that's posted online that you have found, hundreds of other people have also found, and therefore hundreds of other people might also be applying for that position. This is why the most important part of any of my presentation, if you remember nothing else, is that networking is key. If you are able to network with people and have people understand who you are, what you're passionate about, where you are in the process, what you're looking for, they are going to be more likely to have you in mind if something does come up. They're also going to likely shortlist you if a role comes up that you apply for. And therefore, making sure you have people who are supporting you, who know who you are, and are a part of that supportive network that you're trying to build is the most important thing. 80 to 90% of the jobs out there are received and offered because of networking, whether it's on the application, they were able to indicate, 3 or 4 people that they've connected with from that firm and that office, and that's why they're so passionate about working there. Or whether it's the fact that they've connected with people, and instead of posting for the job, instead of waiting for the hundreds of applications to come in and to interview everyone, you just served the need that they had. And instead of going through that process of recruiting for hundreds of people, they just ask you, hey, you like what we do, you've come around at the exact time we need someone, send me your resume, let me consider you for an opportunity. So networking is key. Don't be passive. You really need to take advantage of your own time and really activate your own networks in order to get access to the 80 to 90% of jobs that are out there. Last thing about job hunt is do your research. Some firms, you have to understand what their recruitment cycle and process is like. Not every firm hires directly articling students. Maybe they hire from their second year summer recruit. Maybe some firms hire articling students and junior associates all the time. Maybe some firms are participating in the LPP placements. And the more research you do, the more you'll understand, oh, the firm I'm really interested in recruits this way, which means I should prepare myself to do that job recruit. So I'm going to go through the next few slides about application materials. Again, do your research on the firm, on the job. Preparation time is crucial. I tell students all the time when I look at resumes and cover letters hours and hours on end every week. And every time I'm applying to a new volunteer position or a new board position, it still takes me about an hour, 2 hours to update my own resume and cover letter. And therefore, you will have to also invest the time, especially for a job you want, to update your resume and cover letter so that it doesn't look like just a template resume and cover letter. There is no one size fits all application. Students always want one application, maybe they change up one sentence or one paragraph and then send it out to hundreds of firms. If it reads like a template resume, if I can just remove that paragraph or my firm name and replace it with any other firm name, I'm not going to be convinced that you thought about why you want this job with me. And so you can't have just one template that works across all of the different jobs you're interested in, across all of the different practice areas that you're interested in. Because go back to my first slide, remember, you need to have good written advocacy for yourself. And it's not good advocacy to say, hi, I want any job with any firm possible, please consider me. It needs to be much more tailored to, hi, I'm passionate and I want this job right now because it's well suited for me and I have the exact skills you're looking for. Make sure you understand what is required in the applications. Different firms will look for different things. And so you want to make sure you have ready all of your application documents. This is especially important during the COVID pandemic because there are lots of schools and institutions that aren't printing out transcripts right now, or accessing your grades from different institutions might be difficult. And if the application requires all of your post-secondary transcripts, you want to make sure that you have access to unofficial copies of all of your transcripts so that you can send it off as soon as that application becomes available. Always save the posting that you're applying to because one, you'll be able to refer back to it to mirror some of the language of the tasks and skills that they're looking for. But also on the off chance that you've sent off an application thinking that you'll be able to refer back to the posting to answer some of the questions in an interview, and maybe they've taken it down. So always save the posting somehow on your desktop or print it out or save it as a PDF so that you have access to exactly what that job was posted for, what the skills they were looking for were, and so that you can mirror a lot of that language yourself, both in your application or in the interview. And a few things on formatting, font, and length. Format, there is sort of a structure to Canadian legal resumes that I'll go through on the next slide, but you want to make sure that the information is where a legal employer is expecting it to be, because you never want to make the employer work hard at finding the information that they're expecting to find. Font, make sure you're not, using size 8 or 9 font and trying to just squeeze everything onto the page. Obviously, we can tell that. Obviously, then it also comes off as you don't know how to be more concise with your language, and that you don't know how to sort of manage your writing so that it fits onto the page. And length, in terms of a general rule, 2 pages for your resume, 1 page for a cover letter. Try very hard not to go beyond. In terms of your application materials, you can see there's sort of a general structure to it. Don't pay attention to the actual like words here because it really doesn't matter. You want to make sure it's tailored to yourself. But you can always see the education comes up first. You can also see that work comes second, and then any extracurricular and volunteer and interests go at the end. Unlike a lot of other Canadian resumes, there isn't an objectives section, there isn't a skill section. And why? It's because a lot of times people just put things like, oh, I'm a great interpersonal communicator, I have excellent reading and research and writing skills, but those are all unqualified statements. The employer reading that can't prove it. And where there is a skill that you are hoping to emphasize, just make sure it is a bullet point that you're emphasizing as a part of your work experience. Avoid lists. So I find that a lot of people who especially have a lot of previous experience will say, oh, I drafted this agreement, this document, this order, this order, this order, this order. A list is hard to get through. And there's all that research out there that says people look at a resume for about 30 or 40 seconds. A giant list of all the documents you've ever drafted or all the pieces of legislation you've ever worked with is not going to be something that I remember after reading 200 or 300 applications. And so avoid lists and overlisting all of the different things that you've done. Try to keep every bullet point to one key example of your work and one key skill you developed from that work. So instead of saying something like, litigated at all levels of court, which every litigator has who has ever been a litigator has probably done, be more specific, right? Successfully settled a 2-year-long workplace safety benefit file in the amount of $200,000, right? Again, giving me some specifics about what you're capable of doing, giving me a skill about being able to negotiate a settlement, and understanding how to be precise and show the complexity of the work that you're capable of doing because of the experience you're coming in with. Make sure, of course, not to breach confidentiality. So I often see, students who are like, oh, I represented X and X company on that, $3 million merger. Unless it's public information, make sure you aren't breaching the confidentiality of clients you've represented before. But there are other ways to communicate the scope and scale of some of those deals. Like, for example, if you worked on a deal with one of the oil companies in Nigeria, then maybe instead of listing out that company, you just say, one of the publicly traded or listed oil energy companies in the African continent. To, again, give me the scope and scale of some of this work or the clients you've been involved with so that I understand exactly what you're capable of doing. Specificity with language is important. A lot of students say, oh, but I did so many things on that deal. I negotiated, I did research, I drafted, I worked with the team, I dealt with the CEO, I had to negotiate with the government. You can't focus on all of those things as a part of that example. So you need to choose at least one skill from that example. Was negotiating that deal particularly difficult? Was managing the CEO's expectations particularly difficult? And if that's what you want to focus on, make sure that's the skill you're highlighting as a part of that example. And like I said before, there's no one size fits all. You need to have multiple versions of your resume because depending on if you're interested in litigation, if you're interested in transactional work, if you're interested in public sector and policy work, the way you emphasize skills and the examples you choose to emphasize and bring out are going to be different, because you're going to be trying to communicate that you have different skills that you've developed from your past experience. In terms of a cover letter, like I said, it's 1 page. It should look like a letter. So again, the header at the top, an address, a salutation, and then your letter. Again, make sure it doesn't go beyond that, because nobody enjoys reading letters that are 10, 15 pages long. But here in your cover letter is an example is an opportunity for you not to just repeat all the amazing work that you've showcased on your resume, but it's an opportunity for you to focus on building a narrative. Employers want to know where you've come from, why you've done what you've done, and why this opportunity you're applying for with me works in your overall career goal. So you do have to sort of give an explanation about your journey, why you're interested in this area of law, why you're so passionate about our firm, and why all of your passions and interests and journey make you the right candidate for me right now for this job. And so instead of writing it the way I often see, which is, hi, here's a little bit about me, here's my education, here's some work, thank you for your consideration, please consider me. I actually want all of you to think about writing this again as a piece of written advocacy for yourself. Write this almost like a research paper for yourself. And your thesis is hire me. And so all of your paragraphs should prove why you should be hired for this job. It should have a topic sentence that guides me through your proof, and it should conclude by linking your proof back to your thesis. So constant referral back to the job, referring back to the firm, and why you have the right requisite skills, or why you have the passion in this area of law that they focus on. And you can see how that's a much more compelling argument that you're creating for yourself to convince that employer to at least interview you. You're going to need to have multiple drafts, because every single time you look at it, you're probably going to want to change something else. Avoid vague language, avoid unqualified statements. So don't just state, I have excellent interpersonal skills, I have excellent leadership skills. Actually tell me why you think that and where you've developed those skills. And finally, make sure that, again, you've said everything you want to say. Treat this almost like an opportunity to explain to the employer, if you were to talk to them in person, what the top 2 or 3 reasons you deserve this job are, and just write it that way. And the last thing I will say about cover letters is to actually read it out loud to yourself. I find that students, especially law students, will write very complicated sentences that I can tell you wouldn't ever naturally say that out loud. Don't write in a way that doesn't sound natural in conversation. Canadian legal employers are very conversational in their writing. Our language is much more precise and concise than just sort of typical English speakers. And so you just want to make sure you get to the point and are as conversational as possible. And one of the last things I'm going to talk about is job interviews. Hopefully your application materials are successful and you have the opportunity to get some interviews. Make sure everything on your resume, every sentence, every bullet point is something you have a minute or 2 to say about. So that's why vague bullet points on your resume don't work. If you just write that you have excellent research and writing abilities, that's not something in an interview. If I asked you, oh, do you have anything to say about that? It's very hard to come up with a minute or 2 to say about that. Whereas if you researched a very specific energy initiative that helped reform, some legal framework, then that's something that as an employer, I could potentially ask, what kind of initiative was that? That sounds really interesting. So again, make sure every bullet point, every sentence has something that you have to say about, especially if you were asked in an interview. Practice for behavioral-based interview questions. And these are questions that pose either a hypothetical scenario about how you would problem solve something, or actually a direct question about, have you in your experience experienced this kind of problem? And the typical behavioral-based interview questions center around things that you're going to actually encounter in practice. So things like time management, things like having overlapping deadlines, things like having a conflict with a coworker, things like having been a leader or a follower on a project. And so often the questions will be phrased as, if you were in this law firm and had a disagreement with your supervising lawyer, what would you do? And the idea about going through a behavioral-based interview question is to figure out, what is the actual issue that they're asking me about? How can I problem solve that and give them all different skills to problem solve this issue and come to a conclusion or resolution that they're satisfied with? So there's lots of advice about behavioral-based answering online, on different websites. I've certainly run different videos online about that as well. And many career development offices at law schools will also have resources about how to answer those types of questions. There are differences in private sector and public sector interviews. Private sector employers want to get to know you a little bit more, want to understand if you're a good fit for their firm, whereas a public sector interview tends to be substantive in nature. They'll ask you what you know about the laws that govern what they do, the regulations, the policies, the leading cases. And so how you prepare for a private sector interview is going to be different from a public sector one. And the last thing is practice your answers out loud. Lawyers and law students are excellent at thinking about answers that they have, but not always excellent in presenting it orally out loud. And so make sure you do practice in front of a camera. We're all in front of cameras these days. So record yourself practicing some of your answers, especially some of the answers to questions that you might have difficulty with, like, why did you come to Canada? Why did you go to law school abroad? Why do you want to start your career here? You want to get practicing with those kind of answers so that they're not only authentic and genuine, but that you're not caught off guard if you are asked them. So that's my quick and easy launching your career in Canada. Again, we have lots of resources on our website about different parts of accreditation and licensing. And certainly our team is very familiar with advising internationally trained candidates. But yeah, if you have any questions for Osgoode PD or for myself, you can certainly reach out to this email and ask for Michael, and hopefully they'll send me those questions along. But I'm happy to take the questions that have come in now.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you for that very comprehensive presentation, great advice. And a lot of this applies to virtual interviews as well, right, during COVID. So I think
Absolutely.
everything you shared, all the great information, advice applies to this time as well. So let's get into our questions. First one, to become a lawyer, do we need to know both English and French? How would being bilingual help?
So you don't need to be bilingual in order to become a lawyer. I must admit my French is not up to quality to be able to practice. But how it might help you is depending on the type of firm that you're working with. Maybe you do deal with French clients or Quebec clients quite regularly. For public sector work, especially work with the government, it definitely helps to be bilingual so that you can operate in both official languages. But for the most part, depending on the practice area and the type of clients you're working with, you don't need to be bilingual. Certainly it is a selling point. Again, especially if you're going to be working at a firm that serves a local community. So, in the Greater Toronto area, a lot of the different communities are in certain geographic locations. And it certainly helps. For example, I'm in Markham. If you're a lawyer in Markham, it certainly helps if you understand Mandarin and Cantonese and can communicate with other Chinese clients, but not an absolute necessity to be bilingual in order to practice in Canada.
Great, thank you so much. Next question, where must one apply for an articling position? Can you provide some links?
So there, like I mentioned in my presentation, there's just unfortunately no one place to apply for all of the different jobs. Now, the biggest law firms and some of the major government organizations will abide by the Law Society recruitment timeline. And so they're all due at the same time at a certain period, usually in the summer. So the last articling recruit, I think the deadline was earlier this month. And all of those applications actually go on to a portal called ViLaw Desktop, which is one, again, all of those legal recruiters tend to use. But there are lots of other firms who prefer applications to be sent directly to them. Other firms who might post on different online web forums, other firms that might send job postings to different school career development offices. So anywhere you would typically find jobs like LinkedIn, Indeed, or just online, or these law firm websites, the law firm websites themselves, they'll let you know where to apply for those jobs. But going back to one of my previous slides, anything that you find online, hundreds of other people are also going to find online. And so making connections beyond just finding the job posting is going to be the most important.
Great, thank you. Next question is, can you work as a paralegal without a Canadian degree? Do you need specific requirements?
So paralegals are a licensed profession, just like being a lawyer. You do need to have certain education and training, and you are also regulated by the Law Society of Ontario. So it is a completely different regulated profession than being a lawyer, and you do need specific education for it. A lot of students take paralegal, maybe they work as a paralegal for a little while and then decide maybe to get accredited, and certainly that's something that you can do. But if your ultimate end goal is just to become a lawyer, being a paralegal isn't an intermediary step. If you're intending to become a lawyer, my best advice is usually just to start the accreditation process and try to get licensed. But if the paralegal work is something that you're interested in, they have lots of rights of appearance. There are different types of traffic offenses and small claims issues and different litigation issues that they are competent in and fully capable of giving legal advice on. If that's something you want to do, certainly you can pursue that. But again, it is a career in itself, not an intermediate step to becoming a lawyer.
Interesting. So if I would assume it is, because if I was working in retail, for instance, I would be out of the entire law arena. So you don't advise being a paralegal as, at least staying connected?
I think there are lots of different ways to connect with the legal community beyond just taking a course or beyond just becoming a legal assistant. To show I'm passionate in an area of law, or to show I'm passionate about a firm, I should connect with individuals from that firm, or I should contribute articles and blog posts about things I'm passionate about to increase my profile in that space. Attend conferences, meet people in those areas, try to even, meet lawyers at their firms, ask lawyers to shadow them, go to courthouses and speak to judges if you can. There are lots of different ways to show a passion and an interest in specific areas and to show engagement with the legal community. And it's, again, I go back to one of the points in my presentation. Stop thinking like a student, right? The student will think, I need to take another course. I need to get an A, and therefore they'll know I'm excellent in this area of law. But for many of our participants online today, you already have multiple degrees. Doing another course isn't going to be the breaking point to whether or not you get a job. It's showing that you're invested, involved, passionate, and engaged with the legal community. And there are so many ways to do that beyond just getting a course or getting another designation.
Great advice, such great advice. I think we have time for one more question. Sure. Does one's age have an influence in securing an articleship?
So age, that's a very loaded question. Certainly articling is what a firm will do to train somebody to hopefully move into a more senior position to be able to contribute back to the firm later on. And so certainly there, you know, a lot of people who are entering the legal profession in articling positions do tend to be fresh graduates, and so might be a little bit younger. Age might factor into some hiring decisions if, for example, it's not clear to the employer whether or not you're going to be happy in such a junior level position, right? So somebody who got 15 or 20 years of experience from India or Pakistan, can you spend 10 months doing due diligence and filing court papers and writing legal memos? Are you going to be satisfied with that kind of work? Secondly, can you be trained and untrained from some of the maybe ways that you're used to doing things? Because maybe my law firm wants you to do this kind of work in a very particular way. Where you can't address some of those in your application material, that this is the right place for me, this is the exact kind of training I'm looking for, then there might be some concern that you might be bored, that you might not be the right fit. And so again, I go back to making sure that your application speaks to your journey. Employers want to know where you've come from, what you've done, and why this job is now the perfect place for you. And so just making sure that that narrative is in your application, is in your cover letter, convince them that, you know, the years of experience is going to help you even more as an articling student, that the experience that you're bringing dealing with corporate clients is going to translate to all the corporate clients that you know this firm works for. You then alleviate the concern that comes with somebody who is more experienced applying for a junior role.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Michael. And thank you to everyone for attending our web conference series in partnership with ACCES Employment and sponsored by Osgoode Professional Development. So special thanks to Michael and Megan for sharing your skills and expertise, and also sharing from your own personal experience and taking all the questions. So once again, if your questions didn't get answered, feel free to email. Megan and Michael have provided contact information, and you can also send emails to info@canadianimmigrant.ca. So if you missed anything, this web conference will be posted on our website for you to rewatch, and you can also share links with your friends. And once again, if you have any questions, you can email us at info@canadianimmigrant.ca. So thank you to our wonderful speakers, and thank you to our audience. Take care, everyone. Bye.